Unfortunately, what I was calling for has happened. It's here now. So this is 25 years later, and everything I predicted is coming true. So it's sad. I'm worried. I'm very concerned about humanity and the world right now. The biggest stock market crash is still coming. And this was after the 2008 crash. And the reason I could predict that the 2008 crash was just a prelude for the bigger crash coming, which we are in today. I mean, even China's crashing today, because they never fixed the problem. In fact, the whole problem is that the global economic system is rigged. It's called the central bank system. You know, the Bank of Japan, the Bank of England, Bank of Japan, and stuff like this. This whole system is rigged. So Fuller passed away in 1983. In 84, his book came out called The Grunch of Giants. And so he was already dead. And I'm reading Grunch of Giants, and Grunch of Giants stands for Gross Universal Cash Heist. It's how our wealth is stolen via our money. And that fit my whole internal belief system. And so what happened 2008 crash, it set up the biggest bull market in history. But it was based upon fake money. They just kept printing more, using more debt, because as you know, Brian, money is debt. If we don't borrow money, money doesn't exist. So money comes into existence because every time you use a credit card, take out a mortgage, buy a car, that's when money is created. And that goes back to 1913. Again, the Federal Reserve Bank was created, you know, central banks, which is Marxism. And then in 1913, in America, the Internal Revenue Service was created, the IRS, because money cannot exist without debt and taxes. So I'm sitting there going, holy moly.
I saw you say somewhere that, you know, most Americans don't have more than $1,000 to their name. And when you start inflating that, then that can become half of that. And then you've got most of the American public that are basically become broke. So this is something that can be really debilitating, that can just crush people that are already living on the edge because they've been encouraged to rack up debt, et cetera.
Well, I think why is there inflation is they're trying to prevent the collapse. And Jim Rickards, you know, he's one of the smartest guys I know. He says, prepare, we're going to collapse. And as you know, people don't understand, most 98% don't understand this. The dollar is a reserve currency of the world, which came about in 1944 with the Bretton Woods Agreement. We can just keep printing money. But the rest of the world's collapsing right now. And everybody depends upon the US printing. But that's why I watched China. And when Evergrande came down in 2021, the biggest real estate collapse in history, bigger than 2008. And all of a sudden, they lock people down with COVID. You know, I'm going, I've seen this story before because it happened in 2019. They're desperate, Brian. They're desperate. They're looking for anything that can stop this thing. But you know, every time they said to me, don't fight the Fed, I'm saying, don't trust the Fed was my stay. You know, why would I trust those SOBs? They're a central bank system. The Rothschilds and all those guys controlled them. The richest families in the world control the central banks. And you said you pull the curtain aside. It's like the story of the Wizard of Oz. You know, you pull the curtain aside. There's a little guy back there called the Fed chairman, trying to keep the economy from collapsing on them. But they're going to keep printing until the thing is destroyed.
And is it going to, I mean, are they backed into a corner now? Is it getting to a point where they just can't keep printing to save it? And is that what we're seeing, all of these little cracks in the system from inflation to these hikes? And I mean, QE was working for a couple of years. Is this the beginning of the end of that system being able to keep printing to save us?
Well, there's people much smarter than me who say that.
The S&P 500 is really the S&P 7, and it's being held up by Treasury Secretary Yellen and Powell. So there's no correlation between the economy and what Yellen and Powell are doing. I said one more thing is that I'm a little strange in that I like crashes. So this next crash is going to be really, really good, but it'll bring down gold, silver, Bitcoin, stocks. But the good news is a crash is a good time to get rich. The big debate is there inflation or deflation? And if you look historically, what's happened today is the nominal debt to GDP is a correlation of M2, the volume of money, times the velocity of money. And the reason Yellen and Powell are scrambling is because they've expanded M2, so everybody thinks there's going to be inflation. But velocity of money, which is what Jim Records and I always talk about, the velocity of money is plummeting. People are not spending. So they pump all this money in, prices go up. Meanwhile, the Asians are catching up now. The ports are finally open. So it is transitory inflation. But the problem is we're stacked with this massive debt, and all it's done is bump up the stock market and real estate market. The money has not gone into the economy. That's the sad part. So the rich get richer, but the poor and middle class are getting poorer. It's tragic what's happening today. I don't know what it'll exactly be, but you can't keep printing fake money. That's M2. And the velocity of money keeps dropping, but the debt keeps going up. So you and I don't have to go to Harvard to understand that's not good. This is going to be the biggest crash in world history. We have never had this much debt pumped up. Debt is the biggest problem of all, but that's called M2, money supply. And the debt to GDP ratio is out of sight. So when it comes down, which it brings everything down with it, and I want to give people the big picture. The reason I don't care for Yellen or Powell, because they're both Marxist. And when I say that, I get nailed. I will read you a quote from Lenin. Okay, this is Vladimir. He says, the establishment of a central bank, this is a direct quote, is 90% of a communizing of a nation. That's Yellen and Powell. And the other statement from Lenin is, and this is his manifesto here, the best way to destroy the capitalist system is to debauch the currency. I'd say it's desperate people doing desperate things. As you and I know, the stock market, like I said, it's not the S&P 500, it's the S&P 7. And the separation between the stock market and the economy has never been worse. I'm just disturbed because the money is staying only in the investor market. Every time the Fed does something, the Treasury does something, only guys like me get richer. But the money is not going into the real economy. They're not investing. They haven't invested for years in plant and equipment. So we have massive, massive unemployment and underemployment. And that's why I quote Lenin, the establishment of a central bank is 90% of communism. And the best way to destroy a capitalist system is to debauch the currency. When markets crash, it's the best time to get rich. So I'm getting very excited about a crash coming because the better stocks will come available. Unfortunately, Michelle, there would be massive social unrest. That's what I'm more concerned about, because we have not reinvested. The Fed and the Treasury have only invested in the investor class. They haven't invested in the working class.
It was in 1974 when I came back from Vietnam, a two-tour Marine helicopter pilot. I saw communism at work. It was not pretty. And I come back in 1974, they passed ERISA. ERISA stands for 401k right now, or IRA. And I went, oh my God, they're funneling my generation, the boomers, into the stock market. And they don't know anything about money. And in 1974, the biggest exodus was school teachers suddenly becoming financial planners. I watched it in horror. That's the poor leading the blind. And today we have baby boomers who are hoping the stock market stays up in the 401k just as Social Security goes bust. You think that's an accident? That's all I'm saying. I'm just a Marine. I'm a dumbass Marine lieutenant, flew the gunship, went down 3 times. But today I listen to this bullshit and I go, oh my God, how can we be that stupid? Because we went to school, we did as we're told, don't fight the Fed, do as the Fed tells you, invest for long-term, a well-diversified portfolio of stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, and don't worry, Powell is now channeling Volcker. When the debt to GDP is 120%, you got to be kidding me. So when they were dropping the interest rate, I thought I went to heaven because I buy apartment houses. I own 13,000 apartment houses. Every time the Fed dropped the interest rates, it jacked the value of my properties up, but I also improved the properties and I refinance out. So today I own no money in any of my properties, 13,000 units, all throwing cash. Cash flow positive. It's also called an infinite return. I got hammered by the New York Times because Rich Dad never went to school, but my poor dad was a PhD, was stood for poor, helpless, and desperate. He was in charge of labor unions. He was pro-tax. He was pro-tax to rich. Sounds like AOC to me. Do you know what I mean? I'm listening to this and going, my family, oh my God. So in 1965, I leave Hawaii, where I went to school. I go to school in New York, and my economics teacher is a West Point graduate who flew B-17s in World War II. Instead of having us read Malthus and Ricardo, he had us read Marx, Stalin, and Mao. And the theory at military school is know your enemy. So I understand Marx fairly well, the Communist Manifesto, 1848. That was 1965, 1966, my first trip to Vietnam. I'm carrying bombs to Vietnam on a victory ship sailing out of San Francisco Harbor. And then I saw communism firsthand. I'm like, oh my God, I could see the future. We're eventually overrun by communism. And so in 1930, the Frankfurt School out of Germany, which is Marx's institution, sent teachers to Columbia University's Teachers College in 1930. That was stage one of communism. And then they had to influence our academics first. And I lost so many friends who were all Marine. The saddest days of my life is standing on the deck of my aircraft carrier, and my friends don't come back. You never see them again. Their aircrafts are shot down. They're still MIA. And I get spit on, hit by eggs and all this stuff. But that woke me up. So I started studying more. What is happening in America? So as I said, I use debt now to get rich, and then I invest in hard assets. So that's what we can talk about. My point of view here is, ladies and gentlemen, I would question what you've been taught from school. That's all I'm saying. In a bull market, even idiots feel smart.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.